Please join me in welcoming the Palestinian ambassador to the UK, Dr. Husam Zomlot.
What an honor. Thank you very much, Islam, and allow me, my friends, scholars, educators, students, to first thank the organizers for today's very important conversation. Professor Pauline Rose, the director of Real Center, Professor Maha Shuaib, we go back a few years back, studied together at the same time. So proud of you, Maha, and what you have achieved. And Professor Yusuf Sayyid, Faculty of Education, Research, the Research for Equality, Access and Learning is such a title that is carrying so many meanings that we really do need right now. Pauline, all of the staff and the team of the center and the Faculty of Education Center and Department, and the brilliant video we've just seen capturing the reality of educide. Hang, what is Hang? Who did it? Thank you, Hang. Thank you very much. I was told you come from Vietnam. Yeah. That's very, very relevant to our conversation today. Can you give her a hand, please, to Hang? And of course, my very dear friend, Dr. Islam Shamli, very special thanks. And Islam, I want to say on your behalf before I begin, you resemble Palestine and every Palestinian. Your story is the story of the millions of your people. A young boy of Nablus from a rather modest but very prominent family, who now have made it on his own, despite all the odds, to be a postdoctoral fellow here at Cambridge, specialized in cancer treatment. It makes us so proud that you've done it. And I know, as your ambassador, that countries are fighting for you. Countries are trying to offer you passports, including Germany, to try and be part of their education and part of their health treatment. And this is who we are as a nation. So I want you to know how much proud we are of you, Islam. And allow me also to thank the attendance here. It is a full room, and it's humbling to see all of you, my friends. It's been 223 days of darkness, 23 weeks of war crimes, more than 7 months of mass murder and mass destruction. It's been nearly 4 months since the International Court of Justice ruled that South Africa's genocide case against Israel was plausible and ordered Israel to take all measures to prevent civilian casualties. And it's been almost 2 months since the UN's Security Council called for an immediate ceasefire. It's been several weeks and months since the world, including Israel's closest allies, demanded that Israel not enter Rafah in Gaza's south, that was a red line, where 1.5 million people had taken shelter, refuge from the Israeli military indiscriminate violence and bombardment. And yet it continues, despite more than 120,000 Palestinians killed and maimed, mostly the absolute majority of the 120,000 people are women and children. Israel has moved into Rafah, displacing in the past week only 550,000 people again. People who had previously sought refuge in the southernmost city of Gaza, and I must say the city of my birth. I'm a proud Rafahian, if I may invent this term. Israel insists it wants total victory. Its actions make clear what total victory means for Israel. It means the total dissemination of Gaza. And by the way, also the West Bank. And we should not forget what is happening in the occupied West Bank. Hundreds, more than 500 have been killed since the beginning of this, the last 7 months, many of whom are children. Settler terror violence is in the rise. Settlers are in rampage all over the West Bank. Entire villages have been depopulated in the West Bank, particularly in the area of Al Khalil, Hebron. Arrests in the West Banks are in the thousands, rounding people. More than 4,000 since the last 6 months, only from the West Bank, mostly under the pretext of administrative detention. That means indefinite detention without charge or trial. But, of course, the situation in Gaza is very special. And the Israeli definition of victory is the total destruction of life and the possibility of life in Gaza. Victory means for them turning Gaza lifeless, turning Gaza unlivable. That's what it means. And it means an imposed famine on Gaza's 2.3 million people. Famine in the 21st century. Leaving 20% of families facing an extreme lack of food and nearly 30% of children suffering acute malnutrition. That does not include you. Malnutrition. And by the way, it really breaks my heart to see children on the other side, Israeli children, destroying aid going to children. And I think both are victims here. The first is a victim of indoctrination and racism and hatred. A child should never bear in their hearts such a thing. Senior Israeli leaders have been outspoken from the start, from invoking biblical enemies. Remember Benjamin Netanyahu about the Amalek, or describing us as human animals, the defense minister of Israel, or announcing their desire to resettle Gaza and displace the entire population. And the Israeli military has carried out its orders to the letter. 380,000 homes have been destroyed or damaged. 380,000. That's more than 70% of Gaza's housing stock. 80% of Gaza's healthcare centers are out of service, including 33 hospitals. Of the latter, 25 hospitals have been damaged or completely destroyed. 3 churches, 326 mosques, 195 heritage sites, whole towns and villages reduced to rubble, agricultural land torn up by tanks or leveled in bombings, private enterprises, industry, shops, cultural centers, even graveyards. All targeted, all bombed, all with one aim, making Gaza unlivable. This is genocide. This is genocide. And within this genocide, the education sector has been a crucial target. Of course it has, because a genocide does not target the present only. It targets the future. The UN estimates that 80% of all school buildings in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. That's the United Nations for you. Every university, every single university in Gaza has been destroyed. At least 60% of education facilities, more generally, including 13 public libraries and Gaza's central archives, containing more than 150 years of history, have been damaged or destroyed. Every single one of Gaza's 625,000 students, school students, children, has gone without an education since October. Not one child has gone to school over the last 7 months. Thousands of students have been killed. Thousands. 261 teachers and 95 university professors, including Professor Al-Arair, who you have just seen his writings, his poem, If I Must Die, and many other professors have been killed, murdered. Many more have been injured. Let me remind you that such attacks on civilian infrastructure are forbidden under international law. Of course, they are forbidden under international law. Indeed, schools and hospitals are protected buildings under international law, and their targeting constitutes grave violations of Geneva Conventions. And we know that this targeting has been deliberate. And not just because of the scale of the destruction. We know this from the videos filmed by Israeli soldiers and officers themselves. This is the first time in history a war criminal is documenting their war crime in real time and airing it, sharing it with a glee, sharing it with such a pride. You can look up the demolition of Al-Isra University in Gaza in January. The Israeli military had previously used the building as a temporary detention center and army camp, itself a violation of international law. You are not allowed to use universities or hospitals as military camps or detention and interrogation centers. Then they they put mines. They mined the university and blew it up. A grave violation in the language of international law. And yet, rather than attempt to wield real leverage with Israel, certain countries who have the leverage, including the US and the UK, what they have done? Based merely on unproven allegations until this moment, and the United Nations major report came out only a couple of weeks ago, and it says that we have not received any proof of any allegations. But based on mere allegations, countries like the US and UK were quick to end funding to UNRWA, the single largest provider of education in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria, not just Gaza, by the way. But Gaza relies on UNRWA disproportionately more than other areas. Most of these kids, I've just quoted the number, are educated at UNRWA schools. I was one of them. I was born in a refugee camp. I was educated by UNRWA. They were very quick to defund UNRWA, where some 80% of the population are already refugees from 1948. So some 80% of the students in Gaza are educated by UNRWA. This is catastrophic for education, not only in Gaza, but in the West Bank, as I said, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and all over the place, all over the region where Palestinian refugees reside. This is unconscionable in every sense of the word. Now, I apologize if I have buried you under an avalanche of statistics. But they are the best indicators I can think of to demonstrate not only the sheer scale of destruction in Gaza, but also the size of the challenge facing us in trying to recover and rebuild. The deliberate targeting of the education sector in Gaza has just one aim. To destroy any horizon, political, developmental, cultural, or economic, for our future. And to render Gaza's population without the means, to render our people without the means to develop themselves or even to develop at all. We are, after all, an extremely educated population. Here is Islam, and like Islam, you will have many Palestinians. Here is Farah, one of our pride as well. And many Palestinians in your campus here, in your university, in Cambridge, and wherever I go, in the UK, in the US, worldwide. We are an extremely, exceptionally educated society, educated nation, educated people. We have done And we have one of the highest literacy rates in the world. We have one of the highest per capita PhD holders worldwide. We have grown up with a mantra of education, education, education from when we first opened our eyes, and our parents were already imagining us in our university graduation robes for good reasons. There is a reason why education, education, education is our mantra, because in 1948, which we commemorated the Nakba only yesterday in London and all over the world, we have lost our material base. Our land was stolen, our homes were taken and destroyed, and therefore we invest heavily in our human capital. There's a collective conscious decision about education being the backbone, the bedrock of our resistance and resilience and survival. Our national attachment to education is a direct byproduct, therefore, of the last 76 years of being denied our rights, cut adrift from the normal avenues of survival and normal means to thrive available to those who enjoy their freedom. Education has been our anchor. It has been a means of surviving, of remaining steadfast against the odds, and it is an obvious target for an occupying military. It's a very clear target for an occupying military. After all, it is far easier to subjugate an uneducated population than it is to try to deny rights to a nation of university graduates. As simple as that. So my friends, students and scholars, how do we recover from this educide? How do we recover from this educide? Even with a ceasefire tomorrow, estimates of how long it will take to rebuild Gaza suggest it will take a minimum of 16 years. It could take as long as 80 years. 80 years. We are potentially facing a lost generation. We are potentially even facing a lost 3 generations. In this context, and at least for the school children, committing to funding UNRWA is of paramount importance as a first step to re-establish the education sector in Gaza. This is unavoidable. And I just came from a very important meeting with senior government officials in 10 Downing Street with focus on resuming funding to UNRWA. We need to keep the pressure for UNRWA to remain a main provider for education and other services in Gaza and elsewhere. But let me focus on higher education because of where I am, because of Cambridge University and your contribution here. Efforts to address the immediate impact of the lack of higher education provision will of necessity have to focus on short-term measures for the time being, though any of these will be needed over the long term too. Prominent among these are online courses. Online courses. Already universities in the West Bank, including my alma mater, Birzeit University, are setting up online distance learning programs for students from Gaza. I took part in the launching of that inspiring, moving campaign called Rekindling. So we need to help Palestinian universities like Birzeit and many others, by the way, who are now immediately extending their hands to provide online courses, online learning. These are great initiatives that will go some way to provide some education for some students. Fast-track enrollment in online courses for students close to graduation, for example, could provide a measure of continuity, especially those who are just about to graduate. It's so unfair. To provide a measure of continuity and see these senior students complete their education in fairly short time. Online learning also offers an avenue for teaching assistance. I can envisage a live streaming of lectures, opening them up to relevant students in Gaza from Cambridge. From Cambridge. And the discussion is happening with many British universities, but I would absolutely like it to be Cambridge first. to start the help and the online assistance. Here, faculty in Gaza will suffer from the lack of facilities as much as students. And I would suggest peer-to-peer programs for faculty that would allow professors and lecturers to take advantage of the libraries and resources available online in universities like Cambridge. They need it. They have not only been robbed of their students, they have been robbed of their resources, of their buildings, of their libraries. And to provide them with some means to continue, because you have such a spirit among our faculty in Gaza. So if we provide them with the means to continue, they will continue teaching even from the middle of the rubble. But online learning has many limitations, my friends, as you know. Absent proper facilities. It works for theoretical subjects, humanities and what have you. It is inadequate for practical or science subjects. How will doctors and nurses train? How will scientists do experiments or agriculturalists practice? The ability of students to access specialized facilities is crucial to many subjects. Hence, an expansion of scholarship opportunities for Palestinian students is important and a potential avenue for significant help. Scholarships. There are mechanisms in place already here in the United Kingdom. The British Council's Chevening Scholarship is one of such avenues, though open to only few candidates each year from the occupied territory, from the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza. But it's there. It's there. Hezbal, the Higher Education Scholarship for Palestinian Studies, that's where the name comes from, is another such avenue. Hezbal. Though, again, it was open this academic year to just 14 students. Hezbal, we need to expand that. But the infrastructure is there. If more universities join the Hezbal program and there were more opening under the Chevening program, this would take advantage of structures already in place to reach more students. And there are many British universities that are part of this very prominent program, Hezbal, exchange programs between researchers and academics. So it exists, and it existed for many years. But there are also many other specialized agencies, charities, who are supporting Palestinian education. I mean British, who send many of our students to study here, scholarships, including the Beseso Foundation and many others, without going into the list of these foundations, but there are many who could actually help at this point in time. So this isn't just about resources, this is also about coordination and planning. And there are also the sanctuary universities set up specifically to create to students from disadvantaged backgrounds. In Palestine, we have the Al-Quds Open University. And it is designed for students who don't have access, who don't have the means, the resources. And by the way, there are such models here in the UK and in the world to give access to refugees who arrive here, and they have to, they cannot be treated exactly the same way as students who have been going through the system here. So perhaps, Professor Pauline, we need to think about these models. Because this is a potentially useful model for Palestinian students, and one that could possibly expand the number of students granted scholarships and the opportunity to study in the UK. These, of course, would all require special visa arrangements. But I think with some pressure and work, and we promise to help here from our side, the British government might well be convinced to provide some exemptions for even fast-track status to students, Palestinian students. I believe there is the appetite there and the will there. We just need to work together. We should look at expanding student and faculty exchange programs. And I am happy to discuss with you here in Cambridge and later this evening the ability to link universities all over Palestine. And by the way, let me say this rather in a proud way. As much as we would like to take from Cambridge, we want to give to Cambridge. There is so much talent in our universities, all over Palestine, a lot of talent. and expertise and research. And here is what I also would propose, really, for dealing with the educide and turning this rather tragic moment into a momentum. I would propose that we should look at the Palestine Studies Center here at Cambridge. The Palestine Studies Center at Cambridge. And it's not only its opportunity for the Palestinian lecturers and students, but also to provide in-depth education for other students on Palestine, for Cambridge students and other students in the UK on Palestine. I couldn't think of a better place for such a center than the University of Cambridge. And such a center at this particular moment of time would be studying and expanding on the science and the literature surrounding Palestine, because this now has to do with international law and international legality. This has to do with the prevention and punishment of genocide. This has to do with many arenas that are of great concerns to your students. This has to do with history, and we must study and grasp history and what happened over a long period of time, 107 years. And why I say 107 years, because it all started here in this country, the Balfour Declaration. And the colonial era, and that colonial arrogance of promising our land without consulting us and turning us, the native indigenous population who have lived there for millennia. Palestine is the hub between East and West, the birthplace of Christianity. Jerusalem is holy to the three religions. And we used to live together in Palestine as Christians and Muslims and Jews. I mean, it was only in the last 76 years, thanks to the colonial arrogance. And that whole project. So this study center is not just on Palestine. It's about all of us and our history. It's about Britain and its history. And not all of the history is bright. But if we don't learn from the history, then we tend to repeat the same mistake. But such center also would offer online courses for students in Palestine, scholarships to Palestinian students, and could include the work and teaching of Palestinian scholars and faculty in Palestine, facilitating exchange programs not only for students but for faculty. And we should also look at deepening collaborations with Palestinian universities generally, but of course also in and with Gaza universities. Such collaboration could help not only exchange programs, but rebuilding efforts. And we are willing, happy, ready to extend hands to link you with our universities in Quds, in Jerusalem, in Ramallah, in Nablus, in Jenin. I mean, we have the Arab American University in Jenin, and you will be amazed about the level and the sophistication and the research ability of these institutions, these academic institutions, and everything we need in terms of collaboration and cooperation, from teaching materials and textbooks to equipments and raw materials necessary in specific subjects that will be needed, of course, in Gaza. And hopefully soon we will have to start providing, once this aggression ends, we'll start providing these equipments and materials. Some of this can be sourced from universities around the world. Above all, we need funding and expertise, and we need sustained commitment that will not simply evaporate once Gaza no longer dominates the headlines. We need to build sustainable structures. So my friends, all of this will take time and money. Dedication and commitment to a basic principle of the critical role of education generally, and the role of education it plays in the development of societies, and in this case, the rebuilding. In our case, it's not just the development of the society, it's the rebuilding of the society. It will also take political will. In a political climate in which the British government is providing still material support for the Israeli military, despite all the reports and despite the ICJ and despite all what we have described, I'm not under any illusion that this is a very easy task. And I am aware of the size of the task, but I'm also aware of the goodwill in this country. Indeed, Palestine is impacting academic freedom in the UK as well. And we are following, I am personally closely following the issue of academic freedom and stifling of the debate and attempts at censoring and intimidating and threatening and bullying, even the conversation and the discussion. And where? In academic spheres, in academic. Maha and I come from a generation, that sounds like we are very old now. And we were here. I was at the LSE and so was, Maha was here in Cambridge. But I tell you, in the 90s, we had academic space. Our entire existence and practice was to stretch it, to voice it, to discuss it, with no intimidation, no. Of course, there are always boundaries. But boundaries, if you go beyond the pale, not boundaries you are not allowed to even think or research. So we are following the academic freedom in the UK and attempts to stifle it. It has impacted the debate on the media as well. When people offering different views are labeled as terror supporters, Hamas supporters, this is a way of blocking their platforms, shutting them up, silencing them. When mainstream media fail to include Palestinian voices of any kind in their coverage, this is bias and lends itself to unbalanced, inaccurate reporting. And I'm not even going to tell you what I have gone through in the first, and still, the way and the framing and all of this has an effect, my friends. It has an effect in academia where people may be fearful of speaking out. The weaponization of the charge of anti-Semitism has also had a chilling effect, not only on governments, but on many academic institutions. Some definitions of anti-Semitism is, in this context, highly problematic, conflating in many cases criticism of the government of Israel, the military of Israel, the policies of Israel with anti-Semitism. Yesterday, Palestinians, we marked the 76th commemoration of the Nakba, when 2/3 of the Palestinian people were forcibly displaced from their homes, our homes, including my own father and grandfather, our land, property, in 1948 events, to make way during that time for the creation of Israel. This appalling injustice has never been addressed or rectified. Some definitions of anti-Semitism can be interpreted in such a way as to stifle debate on the Nakba, even on the Nakba, and stifle academic research of this very particular matter, undermining any sensible study of this foundational event in our history, in the regional history, and in the global history. It's a foundational moment. It's an ethnic cleansing that goes to the core of the Palestinian issue, and it is ongoing. It's not just it ended, it's ongoing. Indeed, the exceptionalism surrounding any debate on Israel is having a chilling effect on sensible discussions generally. That's why we need centers and frame the conversation. Here I need to stipulate what should be obvious to everybody. I need to spell it out. The Palestinian struggle is not about the identity of our oppressors. It has got nothing to do with the identity of our oppressors, but the fact of our oppression. We are struggling against the oppression. Doesn't matter what is the color, the religion, the identity of our oppressors. It's a ridiculous proposition to suggest that had our oppressors been not Jewish, we would have been okay with it. Our aims are not to deny anyone's right. Our aims are not to deny anyone's rights, but to secure our own rights in our land. Indeed, if you look at possible solutions, the Palestinians have always proposed outcomes that very clearly consider the right of all equally. Whether it was the PLO's pre-1988 political program, which called for a democratic state with equal rights for all, or the current adopted solution by the Palestinian people and their leadership, which is a two states equal in sovereignty. But what exactly does Israel propose other than continued occupation? Just continued oppression, colonization, theft of land and resources, besiegement, apartheid. Thus, when students like Cambridge students, Cambridge University students, your own students, camped out in protest at injustice in Palestine, are smeared as anti-Semites, hateful. When demonstrators for the Palestinian liberation, and by the way, demonstrations that millions have attended, millions, I wouldn't have expected in one go, in one day, in the streets of London, 1 million. That's historic, and that's outpouring real solidarity and support. And when that have attended from all walks of life, from all ethnicities, right across the country, are described as hate marches. I mean, hate marches? Millions are calling for ceasefire. You call it hate marches? And I have taken part in some of these marches and demos. They are love marches. And people come there celebrating their humanity. I see families and strolls and babies, and I see all religions, and I see the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews. And by the way, big number of them are our Jewish brothers and sisters in the forefront. I see everybody there. It's a manifestation of our humanity. And when lecturers and lectures are deplatformed, or doctors are denied entry to countries, as Germany did to Dr. Ghassan Abu Setti, who had worked through the first months of the genocide in Gaza to save lives, this tells you how far some governments can go to actually, in effect, prevent a witness of what happened from saying what they believe in. These attacks, my friends, understand that these attacks on democratic expression and academic freedoms, they are really an attacks on democratic expression and academic freedom. If anything, the Palestinian struggle for equal rights and liberation is in fact the same struggle as the struggle against anti-Semitism. It's the very same struggle. And we must uproot anti-Semitism because it is vile. All forms of hatred is vile. And I assure you, there is no such a thing as racist light. Those who hate Jews will hate Muslims and will hate Christians and will hate themselves. So it's the same fight. And don't allow them to divide us. No, those who stand for the rights of the Palestinians will be the first to fight anti-Semitism, and vice versa. It is, at its most fundamental, a demand that laws and principles be applied equally to everyone, everywhere. The students here in Cambridge, students right across the world, see this clearly. They see clearly that the Palestinian people is and has been denied our very basic rights because of indefensible and irrational prejudice against us, both historical and ongoing. And they see a political climate that remains hostile to any sensible talk of Palestine, even though this is slowly changing, not least because of the students' efforts and the mainstream efforts and the people's efforts. They, like their peers who come before them, before the current students, many, I would wager, in this very room, have decided to take a stand against gross injustice. The kids, as they so often are, the kids are ahead of the curve. They are simply ahead of the curve. We should celebrate them because those are the leaders of the future. Yes, applaud them. So let me conclude here, my friends. It will be a long, hard road to recovery. And it is a road that must include a political solution. Continued occupation is simply not an option any longer. And I think everyone concerned with Palestine must take this position clearly and without equivocation. Funding for UNRWA must resume. The occupation must end. There must be a Palestinian state. And this is not a favor or a gift of anybody. Our right to self-determination is none of the business of the US or anybody to object it and veto it. There will be an independent, sovereign state of Palestine. And because there is a global consensus around that right of the Palestinians, and you've seen just recently the overwhelming vote in the United Nations, the overwhelming majority of the world, it is reflected also in the millions upon millions of ordinary citizens all over the world demonstrating for Palestinian liberation. To secure such an outcome, what is needed is for the last remaining allies of Israel, including the UK, to shift their positions and fall in line with international consensus, with international law, with international resolutions. If we try to ignore international legitimacy and law, or cherry pick which laws to respect for which ones to ignore in any given situation, the entire point of the international order is lost to the deterrent of us all. Universities in the UK, my friends, universities everywhere, including the University of Cambridge, will play a crucial role not only in helping re-establish the education sector in Palestine, but in pushing forward understanding to lead to resolution. It is precisely the culture of questioning, of intellectual curiosity, and of moral clarity that universities everywhere pride themselves on, especially in the United Kingdom, and especially at places like Cambridge University, that will force the change so desperately needed. It has always been universities, my friends, always, that have shown a path forward, always the student movement, and the professors and the intellectual crowd that have always shown a path forward. Take your cue from the students out there in the tents. Let them teach us hope, because with hope and determination, we can accomplish everything. It's a long road. It is a very long road. Remember Nelson Mandela's long march to freedom, long road to freedom. But with your support and with the support of universities across the world, we can rebuild, we can re-educate, and we can restore a future that could promise so much to so many. Thank you. Yeah.